Hello, welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today I have a fountain pen review for you. And the fountain pen which I will be reviewing is this. It is the Kaweco Classic Sport fountain pen. This is what I would consider a pocketable, portable fountain pen, and that's the reason I bought it. The Kaweco Sport line has been made in various incarnations since around the 30s, and it's a pretty large line. They have a lot of different pens within that line. This is the Classic Sport, a plastic pen, solid colors. The Classic line also has a gold-colored steel nib. The Skyline Sport line is basically, it's similar. They have solid colors made of plastic, but they have silver colored nibs and they have different colors available from the Classic line. They also have the AL Sport line, which is an aluminum pen, and there's various different finishes for that. There's raw aluminum, there's sort of these distressed stonewash finishes. They have a brass sport, they have an acrylic art sport, they have the AC Sport carbon, many different lines. The Classic, like this, the Skyline, oh, and they also have the Ice Sport, which is sort of a semi-transparent pen with, I believe, a silver-colored nib as well. So the Classic, the Skyline, and the Ice Sport are all around the same price, around $25 on most of the major websites. I checked Goulet pens, Jet pens, $25 to around $27 depending on each individual pen. For the Classic, the Skyline, and then the Ice Sport, and then the AL Sports around $80. Brass Sports can be $100. The carbon, the pens that are actually made of carbon or carbon fiber are around $128. So there's a wide variety, a wide range of pens in the Sport line. They all have the exact same form factor, but it's mostly just going to be the materials that they're made out of that change, but they all pretty much have the same nibs. So if you're getting a $25 Classic Sport pen or a $100 Brass Sport pen, they have pretty much the same nibs, so that might make a difference to you. But instead of talking about all these other sport pens, let's take a look at the Classic Sport, the one that I actually have in my hand. This is actually in the Bordeaux color and a fine nib. Let's take a closer look at it. We're gonna look at the packaging. When you get the pen, we're gonna talk about the disassembly. We're gonna talk about the different inking options you can have for this pen. We're gonna get into the measurements, the sizes. We'll do some writing. We're gonna get into every aspect of this pen that I can think of to cover, and then I'll give you my conclusions at the end. So let's take a closer look. All right, gang, so what do you get when you get the Kaweco Classic Sport? How is it packaged? Well, you get that. You get a little cardboard box, very thin, kind of crappy, but whatever. It's a cheap pen. I wasn't expecting much. If I can actually open this baby, and inside the box, you get a pen. You actually also get a blue ink cartridge, but I have a Diamine Oxblood cartridge in there now. Thought it actually matched the finish of this pen quite well. As I mentioned, this is a Bordeaux color pen, so nothing exciting with the packaging. If you get some of the more expensive sport line, like the AL or the Brass, they have a cool little like Altoid tin that says Kaweco on it that can hold two pens. Kind of neat. But with the lower line like this, you don't get that. One thing I did purchase as a separate accessory was this. It is a Kaweco clip, and this is the deluxe version. They range from around $3 to $6, $3 for the normal version, $6 for the deluxe version. I don't know really why this is deluxe. It just looks a little different than the normal version. So it just fits on over the facets like that and seems pretty damn secure to me. So that's a nice option if you wish. The pen itself is pretty interesting in design. The cap is 8-faceted, or has 8 facets. Has a little, let's see if we can get that Kaweco logo on the top there. All the accents are in gold on this, or gold colored. The Skyline Sport, all the accents are in silver color. But you have your cap there. The pen unscrews thusly, and that is where our cartridge is inserted into the section or into the feed. This can be turned into an eyedropper pen because the body is just completely plastic and it is completely sealed once you screw it in. If you put a little silicone wax there, or silicone grease is the word I'm looking for. And the nib, pretty small. I don't know how well you can make that out, but again, has the Kaweco logo, has the grade of the nib, and these are also available in 14 karat gold, but you have to pay about $140 for them. So this is just the steel version. So as I mentioned, your options for inking this pen are going with a cartridge like this. This is actually a Diamine cartridge, which is very cool that Diamine makes ink cartridges. There are several companies, several very well-regarded ink makers that do make international short cartridges, and that's what you need, international short. So you're not giving up a whole lot if you are the kind of person who always likes to use bottled ink, and I am pretty much that kind of person. You can get some very cool ink cartridges, very cool colors. I mean, Oxblood is a very cool color. And kind of the way I intend to use this pen and have been using this pen, the cartridge sort of makes a lot of sense because it's very self-contained, no mess, no fuss, pretty easy to install a new cartridge, throw the old one out when you're changing. So not bad for a portable pen. You can also get a little squeeze converter that Kaweco makes. It's sort of an aerometric kind of converter. Basically looks like a tiny little condom on the end of, well, there's like a little lip that fits in there. Little rubber converter, you squeeze. Apparently you can't get very much ink in there at all. It's very hard to fill all the way. I think the cartridges, which hold maybe about 1 milliliter, probably hold more than that converter does. Or you could convert this into an eyedropper pen. You can fill pretty much the entire body with ink. You don't want to go any higher than where these threads are going to fit into the pen. So you wouldn't want to go any further than that. Put a little silicone grease around there and you'd be fine. Eyedropper pen, huge ink capacity. You could use whatever bottled ink you want. But obviously that would only apply to these Classic, the Skyline, and the Ice Sport versions because those are made of plastic. If you try to do that with the aluminum ones, you will have some problems. Don't do that. And in terms of cleaning on this pen, I'm not going to take this cartridge out now. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. This is quite easy to place a bulb syringe into the end of this little feed and section area and flush it out quite easily. So it's not hard to clean at all. Now, what about measurements? I always find this horribly boring when people do this during pen reviews, but some people are going to ask, so we might as well figure this out. Capped. The pen is right around 4 1/8 inches, or if we want to be international about it, it is about, just, I don't know, 10 and 10.25 centimeters, something like that. I was about to say a quarter, which would be inappropriate when talking about the metric system. Uncapped, the body of the pen, including the nib, is again right around just shy of 10 centimeters and just about 3 7/8 inches. So it's a very compact pen when closed. When you post it, boo-boo, we have got, including the nib, just about 5 1/4 inches, and in centimeters, we have just a little over 13 centimeters. Now, I've mentioned before in the past, I have pretty big hands. You can see that it's perfectly usable once posted with my giant hands. When it's not posted, it's not very usable. So there are maybe some women, some guys with little hands that might be able to get away with using this not posted. For the most part, people will have to post it in order for it to be practicable. The weight on this is right around 10 grams with the cap, but that's without a cartridge. So the entire pen body, and obviously without this clip, is about 10 grams. So it's a very lightweight pen. To me, it almost feels a little too light. I like a little more heft to my pen. When you have it posted, it's definitely usable. It does feel not cheap necessarily, but I don't know. I might appreciate a little more heft to a pen that I was going to use for a longer writing session, perhaps. So, how does this baby write? Well, there's a little bit of a caveat to that because when I originally got it, it didn't write very well at all. It had a lot of hard starting problems, and the reason for that was our good old friend, baby's bottom. A big, fat baby's bottom. The nib tines had been over-polished, leaving a shape sort of like that to the tines. Instead of them being flattish, so the ink, that's a great drawing there, so the ink can actually make contact with the paper. They're over-polished, this is the tines, and the ink cannot make contact with the paper. That looks horrible. That's not good. Let's not pay attention to that drawing. It's not what you think. Basically, you get this, the ink has trouble starting. So you get hard starting problems, some skipping problems. It's an over polishing problem. I had to actually do a little work on my nib. I used some of these babies. These are micro mesh pads, and I had to basically, it's 5-10 minutes of work. It's not a big deal, but it might be something that you might not want to have to do when you get a brand new pen. You shouldn't have to do it. Your pen should write well right out of the gate, out of the box, but I had to do a little work on it. If you want to know how to get rid of baby's bottom, I will put a link to a great video that SBRE Brown did in the description box below. He goes through all the steps. He uses basically the exact same micro mesh pads that I have. I don't know if they're the same brand. I got these off Amazon.com. Just do a search for micro mesh pads. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 grades from 1,500 to 12,000. That's pretty much what you want if you're going to be doing any not grinding, but any work on one of your nibs. So I'm not going to show you how to do it. Other people have done much better videos than I would be able to do. But now the nib works fine, writes fine, starts fine, but that is the caveat. You might have to do a little work on your nib. I'm not the only person who's had hard starting problems, who's had problems with baby's bottom on their Kaweco nibs. I've seen other reviews, watched other videos. It's not uncommon, so bear that in mind. But since I did that little bit of work on it, it's been writing fine. So let's see here. We have got a Kaweco Classic Sport. This is a fine, yes. Fine nib, and the ink is, what is the ink? Oh, it's a Diamine Oxblood. And this is actually a cartridge. It's very cool that Diamine makes their ink cartridges because they have these international short cartridges like so that fit perfectly into the Kaweco, and you have a very nice range of inks. I mean, I love Diamine inks. A little box of cartridges like this, it's pretty cool. So you don't have to give up the quality when you're using a cartridge, you know, the quality that you might have out of bottle inks. But let's see how we go here. Kaweco Classic Sport, we've got all that. So what do we want to write? We don't want to keep doing the lazy fox or the quick fox or the brown dog or whatever the hell we're doing there. So let's see. I like stuff and things. Stuff and capital things are cool. I think we can all agree with that. As you can see, it writes just fine now. No skipping, no hard starting. We have a pretty nice thick piece of ink. Nice layer of ink gets laid down. It's pretty wet. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's wet. It also depends on the ink. I've noticed this Oxblood is a little drier, but there you go. I mean, it lays down a pretty good patch of ink. You're not gonna really get any line variation with this nib. It's pretty rigid. I'm trying to force a little bit out of there, but I'm not getting much. Yeah, I mean, there's a tiny bit. But that's not what this nib is about. Reverse writing. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't know why anyone really wants to do that. But you can do it. What about just the weight of the pen? Oh, baby. Yeah, so the feed keeps up just fine. That's just the weight of the pen on the paper. One thing I wanted to do is just compare the line width here. This is a fine, a Western fine, Kaweco German fine. So we can see the line width there. This is an extra fine. This is a Lamy Studio, so it's just a steel Lamy nib. And then I have a medium. This is a Lamy 2000 in medium. And you can see that the Kaweco line width slots in there pretty nicely between the medium and the extra fine. So it seems like it's pretty true to size in terms of nib width. Another thing to bear in mind with these Kaweco pens is that the nib units, can you see, can just screw right out of the pen, and they're interchangeable amongst all these sport pens. So even the AL Sport, the Brass Sport, the expensive Finnish sport pens use these same nibs, and these nib units are interchangeable, and they're around, you know, $10, $13, $14, $10, $13, $10, $11, $12, $13, $14, depending on where you get them. Jet Pens carries them, and they come anywhere from extra fine to double broads. So if you do get a pen with kind of a nasty nib, you could always go the route of ordering another one. And it's also kind of fun to have interchangeable nibs. That's one reason I like the Lamy pens so much, that have just these steel nibs that are about $10, $13. You can change them around, try different widths on different pens. It's kind of cool. So you do have that option with the Kaweco with these nib units that can just screw right out. I'm not going to do that right now because this is inked up. So there you have it, the Kaweco Classic Sport fountain pen. I've enjoyed using this pen quite a bit. I actually really like it. I like the looks. I like the aesthetics of it, the design. I think that for a portable on-the-go fountain pen, it's pretty hard to beat this design. The fact that it can be so compact and then you just post it and it turns into a full-size pen that's pretty easy to use. I wouldn't use it for really long writing sessions. I think you might, just my hand in particular, it's not the most comfortable for writing page after page after page, but for an on-the-go jotter, I think it works great. And as I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of cartridges, but in a pen with this sort of use in mind, something that you're throwing in a bag, something that you have in a pocket, the cartridge actually makes a lot of sense because it's something that's self-contained and you can just trade in, trade out a cartridge. You don't have to worry about carrying an ink bottle with you. And if you want to, you can always, you know, convert it to an eyedropper pen, as I mentioned earlier. The only caveat with this pen, as much as I enjoy it and as much as I appreciate the design, I think that for someone who is not willing to put a little work into a nib, it may be a bit of a gamble. Now, I don't own any other Kaweco pens other than this one, but this one didn't have a great nib out of the box. And other reviews I've read, other things I've seen, forums I've read, it seems to indicate that Kaweco does have a little bit of a spotty quality control record. Sometimes their nibs don't write great right out of the box. And that's the kind of thing that you have to decide. Do you want to put the work in to maybe tune the nib a little bit? Are you willing to buy extra nib units? As I mentioned, they're $10, $13, $14 for new nib units, or go through the hassle of returning the pen, trying to do kind of a crapshoot until you get a pen that works well right out of the box. You may get a great pen and it may work fine. You may get a pen like me and you might have to do a little work on it. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. With that little caveat though, for the price, $25 for a Classic Sport, very, very reasonably priced. I think it's a great pen, but you may have to work on the nib a little bit. So keep that in mind. But there you go. That's my review of the Kaweco Classic Sport fountain pen. I may be picking up one of the aluminum bodied versions in the future, so keep your eye on the station, on the channel, whatever this is, a YouTube channel. And in the future, I may have a review on one of those pens as well. But until then, until next time, until we meet again, I've been your good friend Bradley. You have been the audience. This has been the Stuff and Things review of the Kaweco Classic Sport fountain pen. I'll see you later.